Let's talk about the accommodators of autocracy. Why? Because though they often think of themselves as protecting democracy and capitalism, history shows that future generations may well judge the accommodators of autocracy as having failed our generation's greatest test. So let's talk about it. The history to which I allude is that of populist movements throughout the world that have slid from some form of illiberal democracy into autocracy. And we've witnessed that with over 40 nations in my lifetime. It could happen to us too. In an earlier video, I talked about the battle for America's soul. And I described how certain folks who I'll call ambassadors were complicit in the rise of the strong man by accepting, embracing, and even advancing the strong man's conspiracy of lies. But there's another group who are not quite as complicit as the ambassadors, who enable that rise. I call them accommodators. It's interesting to note that in almost every slide into autocracy that we study, we see that there's a group of people who actually recognize the character defects of the charismatic leader, but they mistakenly believe that they can contain that agenda and insulate themselves. Then some kind of calamity, some catastrophe, either manufactured or real, happens, and they conclude that the policies of the charismatic leader will right the ship of state in its crisis and in some way benefit them. It's important to remember that accommodators generally are well-meaning, highly influential, highly respected citizens and outstanding neighbors who make a grave mistake. They think that what's needed in the state of crisis is a set of policies, and they forget that in a state of crisis, the one essential, non-negotiable thing is the character of the leader of the ship of state. We remember George Washington for his character, not his policies. We remember Abraham Lincoln for his character, not his policies. We remember Teddy and Franklin Roosevelt for inspiring us in times of crisis to be our best and most courageous selves, for their character, not their policies. In the history of lost democracies, the grave mistake made by accommodators is to fail to recognize that the essential test for a national leader is character, not policies. For they soon discovered that once they elected a strongman with defective character, their last election was the last meaningful election of their lives. We see this most obviously in 1930s Germany and in late 20th century Russia. Scholars cite many examples of this slide into autocracy, including China, North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Syria, Mali, Zimbabwe, Nicaragua, and more than 30 others. In every case, the accommodators thought that what mattered most was policy over character. But what they soon discovered was the charismatic leader, once empowered, moved swiftly to replace the people's sovereignty with kleptocracy. And they eliminated transparency and accountability, and soon after, anyone who got in their way. And before long, even the wealth that the accommodators assumed would be protected through their accommodation was plundered by the autocrats' political machine. By then it was too late. They had already missed their opportunity to resist. So what does history teach us concerning autocratic attempts? Well, the first lesson is that character proven matters more than policies promised. We the people can correct bad policy, but not bad character once we've enabled a strong man. Second, History shows that the accommodators are themselves usually elites, especially business people and wealthy professionals like doctors, lawyers, and financial wizards, who think they can contain the damage done by the strong man. But ultimately, they can't, and end up themselves seeing their own wealth plundered by the strong man in his political machine. And that leads to the most important insight, and that is that the strong man must be contained, must be stopped before and not after being entrusted with power. In a future video, we'll talk about why accommodators of autocracy are often blind to what's at stake and are unable to see until it's too late. In the meantime, we must do everything in our power to raise the alarm and to equip our fellow Americans to resist. Godspeed.